Hi, Shelby. How you going?
I'm doing great, Usman. How are you doing? Your new program is starting.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you. I'm doing really well too. Thank you for making time and speaking with us at Catalysr. And for everyone who's listening, we are doing another amazing story of a migrant who has been building very quietly an incredible business called Oasis. And it's really a pleasure and privilege to be able to see your journey, Shelby. And I would love to kind of share your journey with people that are listening and watching. So can you start with just sharing your story and how you got involved in all of this kind of work you're doing with entrepreneurship?
Okay, so first of all, it's an absolute pleasure, and I hope to highlight how Catalyzer was so integral in the development. But I'm going to say my story was kind of interesting insofar as I started in a really traditional FMCG marketing career path with Johnson and Johnson. The only thing not traditional is I was in Europe doing it. But then over the progression of my career, a couple of major steps happened that really put me on this trajectory. The first one I think was working with Burt's Bees. It was a purpose-driven brand. And it was the first purpose-driven brand I had ever worked with and where the values aligned with my own. And so I was never going back from that. And the second was actually starting my own consulting business where I work with founders and entrepreneurs across Africa and establishing and growing their climate related businesses in energy, recycling, and waste. And during COVID, of course, I was in the US and I was working with smaller purpose driven brands that were being led by founders like the Honest Company, that's a personal care company, and Califia Farms, which is in plant based milks. So, and I was really helping develop their international footprint. So, what I think you're hearing at this point is one, I went from a very typical FMCG to very purpose driven and was getting really close to working with startups, although none of them were startups, but working with the founders that were the inspiration. So, it was a natural when I returned to Australia after COVID, it was natural for my mindset to be open to that, particularly when I saw a pretty major opportunity, a gap in the market to support the shift to sustainable products. So does that make sense? It's kind of a long one, but it's been a bit of a long career path as well.
Yeah, no, that sounds really fantastic. And obviously, as you know, we talk about entrepreneurship is not a so straight line. There's all these so squiggly different ways it's a worm that you're going different directions. But it's great to hear about your journey, how it took you obviously back to the US, work in Africa, then COVID brought you back to Australia. So you kind of did a bit of a big world trip. Yeah, really interested in the work you're doing with Oasis now and what's the purpose behind it and why you're doing it.
So the big market opportunity that I saw is first and foremost, I've been working with sustainable products for the last 15 years. And I firmly believe they're the future. That's that's that is where the trajectory is. And I think Australians are some of the most forward facing regarding sustainability. And in fact, what I discovered is that 87% of Australians want to buy sustainable products, but don't because of three key barriers, which is prices are too high, the performance is too low, or the proof is just too hard to actually figure out. And actually, all of these beliefs reflect the current market environment. So prices are too high. Most of the online e-tailers have outstanding products, but nobody can really afford them, especially in these tough economic times. And the performance, it's terrible in the Kohl's and Woolies, the traditional retail. I personally face that trying to find green laundry detergent. After going through four, I gave up on own label brands and what they had in the retailers. And lastly, the proof is extremely difficult, and it's intentionally so with the lack of transparency, the conflicting information, and intentional greenwashing because there's no consequences for bad behavior. So these Australian beliefs were reality. This is what we're facing in this market. And so I created Oz Green Oasis specifically to address every one of their points. So in the context of Oz Green Oasis, we offer Australians a stress-free natural skincare shop. Every product is verified to have proven performance, natural formulas with none of the nasty stuff in it, and sustainable packaging. And there's price points at every budget. So it's really affordable. And so the meaning of Oz Green Oasis is it's only for Australians. Green in terms of both the formula and the packaging. And the Oasis part is actually allowing consumers to shop according to their beliefs. So they can actually support or choose products that are from women-owned businesses, for example, or they can define how they want their products made in Australia or from a certified B Corp. So again, that's another thing where I think we're driving towards allowing people to shop according to their values. So I'm happy to say today, Australians can effortlessly shift to affordable, effective, and sustainable natural skincare that's good for the skin and the environment. And so now we can all feel a little bit better about what we're doing for ourselves, our family, and the planet.
Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for sharing your purpose. And I think it's such a great, I guess, kind of work you're doing, because I mean, I've personally used the products that you're selling, and really, I guess, seeing how, you know, they do come in a lot of that sustainable packaging and the work you're talking about. So there's a lot of thinking that's gone behind all of this work. But obviously, when you're doing this work and you're starting out fresh, there must be different challenges that you would have faced or experienced. You know, like as people say, entrepreneurship is a roller coaster. So I'm really curious on what your experience has been on this journey, and you know, being a migrant entrepreneur specifically, how's it's kind of benefited you, but also, you know, some of the barriers that it might have created for you as well.
Okay, so a couple of things. First of all, I'm going to give you a top line for all the people who think, oh, starting your own business is so sexy. Look, it's been exhilarating. It's been inspiring and exhausting. So it is nonstop learning, which I love. Okay, that's part of the passion of why I was always focused internationally, is love learning new experiences and new cultures. But the experience of drinking from a fire hose basically every day, all day, that that's a new experience. You know, I thought I had challenges previously and turning brands around and relaunching globally, et cetera. Yeah, nothing has been as challenging as starting my own business. Now, in terms of being a migrapreneur, this is where I'm going to sing the praises of Catalysr, because for me, that was a game changer. And it was a game changer for a number of reasons. One, working with experienced entrepreneurs helped me learn and navigate. I consider the world of entrepreneurship like a completely different planet, right? I come from the world of corporate, even though we were scrappy and international. It's a completely different world. It is a completely different mindset. Even the way you forecast, it's the different skills necessary for success. And experienced entrepreneurs were vital in me developing those skills to be successful. The second is a network of trusted professionals. Okay, so the reality is I just got back to Australia. Every time you meet either a lawyer or an accountant, you just feel like you're trying to get billed. You know, that's the first thing. And thanks to Catalysr, you get this group of vetted experts where you can really trust and you can actually get multiple opinions. So that was just a godsend. But probably the biggest thing that was for me was the community. And, you know, look, I'm a solo founder and it can get really lonely. And so it was after the Catalysr program ended, I wasn't ready to end. And I really worked with other founders because they're inspirations. They provide support and different thinking to overcome your challenges and even accountability. Like when you say to somebody, you're going to have this done like in the next 2 weeks, and you don't do it, there's just an ego thing there. So you just make sure you get it done. So that's what I would say has been incredibly beneficial as a migrapreneur. I cannot say it enough. So thank you again, Usman, for allowing me that opportunity. Now, the challenges are challenges I've kind of been aware of working internationally. One, a cultural sensitivity. Okay. Aussies have an amazing sense of humor, but you don't know where the line is. So you have to, as a migrant, I've got to respect that, and I'm very sensitive about it. because I don't want to trod that line. I don't have the confidence to do that. So I stay away from it in all communications, and just listen and learn from my Australian contacts and friends. And the other aspect is that things change when you're not on the ground. Life moves on. And a good example of that is when I was with Burt's Bees, Earth Day was enormous in Australia. It was the gateway event for people interested in living more sustainably to find out about innovations, brands, and products that they would put in their consideration set. Well, no more. This past Earth Day passed without anybody even acknowledging or recognizing it, at least in New South Wales. I think Victoria is a little bit stronger in some of what they achieved. So now I'm finding out, and it could be just that there's so many different events, right? There's Plastic Free July, there's Vegan Wary, that there's maybe just not a focus anymore. But you really only understand that being on the ground and seeing the evolution of what's happening. And lastly, it's understanding the market dynamics. Like I can tell you the skincare dynamics globally, like what are the brand players and who's raising or growing and who's dropping. But that doesn't necessarily reflect Australia. So you got to get the detailed understanding of who's up, who are the innovators, who's down, and even what do they do, whether drop shipping is a viable option or not. So it's understanding those micro environmental aspects and market opportunities that there's just no way around it. You need to do the work and figure it out.
Thank you for sharing that, and also thank you for your word of confidence on Catalysr. I'd say, we are lucky and privileged to be supporting amazing founders like you, because I mean, yes, we can put you in touch with people, with experts, or with community, but you are the one who has to go out there and actually, start and work really hard, which I know you've been doing for the last little while. So thank you for doing that. For anyone who is thinking of starting an eco enterprise today, do you have any tips that you want to share with them on what to do, what not to do?
I'm going to focus on what to do, right? Because I think there's some not to do that have come out in our discussion already. The first thing I'm going to say is you've got to love your business venture idea and be passionate about it. It has got to be the thing that anchors you through drinking from a fire hose, right? And you got to be with it every day, all day, and be willing to go to bat for it. So you got to love and be inspired and be passionate and believe in it. That's the first and most important thing. The second is if you're a migrant, look at the Catalysr program. It's going to open up a world of opportunities that you don't even know exists. The third thing in that context is get connected. There is a strong eco community in Australia, and I say get connected locally, in Australia, and globally. And that can be things like Catalysr, fish burners, climate salad, universities, the UN. You've got to find your peeps to stay up to date on the latest innovations and the trends of what's happening, because there's a lot that's happening, thankfully, right? That's a really great thing. Additionally, I would say keep your day job if you have one. Develop your business until you can afford to ship without jeopardizing or compromising your quality of life or your living standard. And lastly, and this really kind of depends on your business idea, try to be part of a team versus going solo. It's easier. It helps you brainstorm better ideas. It helps you be stronger and more flexible. So those are, I would say, my top ones, because if you are a solo founder, you got to kind of create your own infrastructure, which is a little tougher, and people are not as invested as you. That's just the reality.
Thanks, Shelby, and I think there's some really great tips there. Particularly, some of the last things you're talking about around having a team, around making sure that you get connected, you're sort of following the trends. But I think you sort of started this earlier where you mentioned, entrepreneurship, can be seen as sexy, but it is exhilarating and exhausting at the same time. So it is quite glamorized often, right? And so I'm really curious on I guess on the ground, being as a founder, what it's like currently, particularly in the current sort of financial environment where it's hard
Mm.
kind of to convert I guess deals into businesses or into customers, raising capital, things like that.
Mm.
So as founders, we deal with failure on a regular basis. And I'm sort of really curious to hear from you around what your learnings has been, that journey. How has that kind of shaped your own resilience as well? If you want to share that, that would be awesome.
Okay, so that's a big question. So I'm going to unpack little pieces. Look, I'm going to tell you the environment for startups right now today is pretty tough. I think we've all heard about startups downsizing. I mean, look, everyone at Facebook has gone through 3 rounds of downsizing. So in that regard, I would look at that in the Chinese way of looking at opportunity. So risk and opportunity are like the same coin, if you will. And so all those brilliant tech people now are trying to find a new home, and that home may one of the homes may be a startup. But in terms of the difficulty of raising capital, that is a reality. There's a lot of question marks around the economy. And I think that's one of the reasons why I highlight don't quit your day job. For me, it really hasn't affected. And I would say the reason why it hasn't affected is my opportunities Australia only. And generally, VCs and raising finance is not an option when you're specific like that. They really look for global opportunities. But for colleagues that do have a global opportunity, I know it's been really hard yards. And combined with the tightness on financing, you've had major programs like the MVP program just shut. And now everyone's anxiously awaiting, are they going to reopen that? And where their status is, because I knew people that actually applied for those grants and they just stopped the program. And so when you have a government going through tough budget crisis, or you have a new government that's in, that can really impact where you're going with things. So the statement of you got to love what you're really your startup, that's where this comes. And you also, I would say the good thing about finance being a little tougher is it forces you to really focus on your fundamentals and really operate on a shoestring budget, which I think is always the smartest thing to do with this startup, is don't expand ahead of where your capabilities are. So use it as an opportunity. And the last thing is I would say is, look, we've got brilliant people in this ecosystem. We've got like people like Cannon Brooks, who's got funds and things like that. So if you have an idea and it's a great idea, there is the opportunity to build and grow and secure financing. It's just tougher, which just means you need to get further down the road and demonstrate traction before you can actually attract it. So it's not impossible. It's just tougher. That forces you to be stronger and tougher to survive in that environment, which again, I think is a good thing. It puts you on a better trajectory. So the biggest lessons for me that I've had on mine, look, my initial vision of Oz Green Oasis was a green Amazon. And I learned it wasn't viable as drop shipping for the brands that I really wanted to secure was not an interest. And the criteria of addressing those Australian concerns was paramount for me. So what I did is I pivoted to a natural skincare e-commerce store and still really focused on my bigger mission of addressing the Australian concerns. So I would say that's one big learning. The second I would say to anybody on the journey is focus on what you know best. I had 20 years of skincare, but I was initially looking at home cleaning. I think it was because when I first returned, it was the spring cleaning time. Luckily, thankfully, I shifted back to what I knew best, which was skincare, which was a much smarter play because I have confidence and a great deal of understanding of that market and that consumer. And lastly, and this is something I've always done, right? Test small and test often. So I would say to you, until you build what your launch model is, you should be testing all the time. And that should just be a good practice. And look, I did that at J&J when I did new market launches, just to always find out what that next traction channel was. That I think is just good practice. Now, resilience. Usman, you hit a key thing with resilience. Now, when we talk about entrepreneurship is glamorized and sexy, no thanks. It's not sexy. It can be a really painful thing until you get used to hearing it so much. Your skin is thickened. I'm going to say some key elements of resilience is one, flexibility. Bend, don't break. Keep your eye on the prize, the bigger picture of what you're in this for, and pivot to really deliver on that to the best of the market opportunity allows. Two, get inspired. That's part of your getting connected. Entrepreneurs are out there doing extraordinary things. Find out about them, because if they can do them, you can do them. And that really builds your way. One, it gets you started in the morning. And two, it makes you look at things differently, which is, again, vital. Three, laugh in the face of failure. Two, because it's a whole lot more enjoyable than the tears, right? And so in that regard, learn the lesson and move on. Don't wallow in it. Now, I'm going to say that the Matildas really demonstrated this. If you think, I'll never forget a picture after one of their games where those women were beyond disappointed, right? Their dream just went up in smoke. But if you step back and realize they had the best achievement that the country has ever seen, and they had the entire country inspired and behind them, that is extraordinary. Now, you're not going to feel that on the moment of that tremendous failure or when your dream isn't realized the way you had hoped, but you got to give yourself distance and focus on the achievement and not the disappointment. And lastly, I'm going to say for resilience, you have got to take care of yourself. You must. And that is defined as eating healthy, sleeping well, move, be active, and have fun. If you do, these are critical success factors. This is what puts more energy, puts more fuel in the tank for you to tackle another day. So those have been my areas of resilience or development and growth.
Thank you so much, and I mean, I can hear like there's so much wisdom in those sort of last few things that you've been saying. Not just in terms of what founders should focus on, like do common sensical things like keep a job, and try to kind of make sure that you're understanding how traction works, how to really test your ideas and hypothesis before you go, I've got this great idea, surely it's going to happen, and surely this is going to be amazing. But actually letting the market kind of tell you, and be flexible and kind of nimble. I think it's really, really great advice. And then also, I guess, in terms of how you've built your own resilience, I love the example you give of Matilda. I think it's really fantastic. And I think one thing that I wanted to pick on, which you mentioned at the end, was around self-care and well-being. So you mentioned, like some of the things the founders could do. Really curious on what your kind of self-care, well-being kind of regimen is. Like, do you do it often? Do you sometimes fail to do it? How's that when you're actually in the trenches trying to build a startup?
Okay, so some of these practices have been over a lifetime, right? And yes, I try to do it pretty religiously, pretty daily. And it's a morning, afternoon, and evening regimen that I do, but it doesn't take a lot of time. So I always start the day with yoga, and that gets me grounded for the day. And then I combine that as I'm like getting my breakfast ready with inspirational words. And that really, really gets me inspired to go, to pick up the phone or reach back out. And those inspirational words can be related to sustainability, which is my area of passion and Oz Green Oasis. It can be business or it can be life, right? It's just, but the whole point is it really lights you for your day. In the afternoon, I always eat a healthy lunch, mandatory, meditate after lunch, and then and the meditation really resets your brain. It gives you some rest and restore, and then get moving. You got to get out of your cage. Now, in the winter, that means walking for me. But what I love now that we're in spring is I'm going to be snorkeling again every day. But you got to find the place where it lets you get away from the stresses of the moment. And it's really vital because when you come back and you're restored, you've got a boatload of different energy. You've got a different perspective on stuff. And the last thing in the evening is I try to stop working around 8. That really gives me time to wind down before I get into bed and have a really good sleep for the next day. But I also try to journal my achievements and gifts of the day, which helps me focus on the successes and not the disappointments. Because I don't know about you, Usman, but like I can have some of the most extraordinary achievements and that disappointment just buries them. And so when you go through the practice of forcing yourself to recall the totality of the day and all the stuff you actually moved or progressed, it leaves you in a much better space versus a really stressed head as you go into to sleep. And instead of thinking of 100 things you could have done differently to offset that one disappointment, you actually finish the day with, these are all the things that I progressed, and it actually starts to set you up with a very successful next day of what do you plan on finishing or what do you plan on taking. So those things are my godsend. I will tell you, if I end up working much later because it's like I really wanted to make that deadline, so I push it to 10 or something like that, and I end up going to sleep after midnight, I'm done for the day when I wake up the next day. So I really try to adhere to those practices as much as possible on a daily basis to really keep myself like a well-oiled, fun-filled machine that's enjoying the journey. You've got to enjoy the journey. If you're obsessed with just that goal and don't appreciate your daily journey, it's going to grind you down. So I'm not sure if you do any of those. I did appreciate Catalysr actually taking a time out for one of those days because I do see the health and wellness as a critical success factor on the journey.
Thank you for sharing that. And this is something that I know so many founders actually don't focus on, or oftentimes they don't talk about, is the mental health, well-being, and kind of eating habits, sleeping. I know I'm sometimes terrible personally doing these things, kind of like staying through to it. But I think it's so important to kind of remind ourselves around, saying eating healthy, meditation, exercise, yoga, whatever kind of works for you. I think, and this is another thing, right? Like you might be someone who kind of wakes up early, kind of does these things in a certain way. Some people, like to kind of stay up late and do that. But then as long as, you've got a way of ensuring that, you're meeting enough sleep, meeting enough kind of, healthy food, all this kind of thing, that's fine. Like whatever your kind of body is. But I think oftentimes we don't think about those things because we're like, oh, we've got to go and push for this really hard goal right now. And I think, as you said, like you have to have that picture of the, future and the what the long-term vision is, but at the same time, have fun and enjoy. It's so critical. So thank you for sharing that. That's really powerful.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to mention, Usman, is when, like, as a solo founder, you think you're the only one that's experiencing this, that you're the only one that do these stupid things or waste your time. Building that community around you makes you realize you're not alone. And then people kind of give you tips on how they handle it, whatever the challenge is, so you can actually work much more efficiently and effectively. But that you're not alone is a really integral part, right? Because you do some stuff and you're like, God, maybe this is just too hard. If I just make these stupid mistakes, I'm sure nobody else is. And then sure enough, if you have a community, you figure out, no, there's a crowd of us that's actually that. And that helps alleviate that, it's okay. It's human. There's some errors, there's some mistakes, but it's nothing that's really gonna take you off course too much.
Yeah, and I guess the other aspect of that is also having that community really helps with your well-being as well. So
Yeah.
so that's just really beneficial, right? Because then you're not just learning from other people's sort of mistakes or successes, but then also kind of just having a good time, right? So it's kind of bakes into that. Um, really curious to hear, as you mentioned, journaling and writing about your success and kind of achievements. So over the sort of period that you've been an entrepreneur, what is something that you've been really proud of so far as a part of your journey?
I'm going to give you two things on that. The big picture is that I've actually launched Oz Green Oasis, and true to its mission of making eco easy and being part of the solution for a better, healthier future, right? So I actually did it. Now I'm in the process of trying to make that a success. Um, now, so that's a big thing. The smaller thing, but I have to tell you, I'm equally as proud because it was unimaginable 3 years ago. Is I recently rebuilt the Oz Green Oasis website to deliver a faster and better customer journey or experience. Now, the reason why I say that this is not possible, and probably every IT expert I ever worked with would be like astounded, is my superpower is strategy and communication. And my kryptonite has always been IT. So and it was never an issue because you had a team. And I worked with amazing people. Whether it was social media, on the software, it was just amazing. Well, that's not an option as a solo founder who's not a multimillionaire that can bankroll some brilliant IT people. So you got to learn. And I would say I learned to the degree where I actually did it all, revamped it all myself. And look, don't get me wrong, I still have a lot more to learn, especially on leveraging AI and automation to simplify it. But the concept that I actually could do that at all, not just strategically design it and say that this is what the path is, but actually execute it, I don't believe it, let alone my past colleagues believing it. So those are the things that I would say I am most proud of on both a big picture and a very specific basis.
Well, congrats on launching. That's awesome. And also congrats on becoming an ID expert. We know who to call next time something gets
Okay,
broken.
you can't use that word because we have people like Saurabh who really own that word. But
Fair
I
enough.
would say I've improved.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the this is for all founders, right? There's so many opportunities now with low code and no code tools that
Yeah,
doesn't matter where you're starting, what you're doing. There's a lot more you can do now that you could in the past. There's a lot more that it's a lot more intuitive than you think it is. So whether
yeah,
it's starting a prototype or a website or something like that, oftentimes it's kind of drag and drop. And you like in our minds, it's still about writing code. Most of the code has already been written, and so I think it's also just kind of rechallenging your own assumptions and hypotheses around what does it take to actually build something, but it be something that you begin with, right? And then once you've tested it, once you've tried it, and then you've got the capital, then you're looking for growth, then you can do it in a different way. But it's just really that early stages, I think. You've kind of, I guess, personified this where as an entrepreneur, you have to do everything. You have to kind of make sure that, you kind of keeping all the lights on and making sure that everything gets done, especially as a solo founder because you don't have other people in the team. But at the same time, make sure that you do it cheaply and quickly as
yeah.
well. So if you spend too much time on a particular thing, that might also not be great. So thank you for sharing that. That's really, really great. Now, I know that obviously you've been at this journey for a little while. You've had this amazing, I guess, insights and kind of learnings as well. But I'm surely, there's things that you would do differently. So if you had a time machine and you could go back to the start of your startup journey, what would you do differently and why?
The first thing is I would have focused entirely on an e-commerce store from the outset. That was a full year in approaching different partners for the marketplace that I could have spent and actually being out in the market and optimizing. That's the first big one. The second one, I think from day one, I would have joined Facebook groups and followed influencers related to sustainability, sustainable living, and natural skincare, just to listen and learn where the market is rather than by doing and failing. Those are the two things. It's just that opportunity to listen and to follow and to learn, so critical. And I've been playing catch up ever since then. And so those are the two I would recommend. If you have a business venture and you think there's a market gap for it, explore it just by following folks that are leaders within that, just listening to what they're saying, what they're doing, and seeing if that gap is in your mind or in the market. So those would be the two that I definitely would have loved to have that. If you ever get that time machine, Usman, you know who to call.
Sounds great. I think you haven't lost too much time. You already started on this. Like people go much further along and then realize, hang on, we're building something, and maybe there's not a market for it. The market doesn't necessarily need it this way. I think that's kind of part of the journey of evolution. When you build something, you test it, you trial it, you see what kind of comes out. But I think that knowing that many of the founders who are just starting out will definitely spend a lot more time in really understanding the market, understanding the customers, what their needs are, how they can meet them. So that's really brilliant advice. Now, I know we've already taken so much of your time, so thank you. I'm going to end up with one of my last questions, which is, what is your big vision, right? So if everything goes really well with Osgreen Oasis, say in 2050 or 2100, what is your big vision for the future? And any asks that you have for people who are kind of listening to this and watching this on how they can support you in that future?
My vision for the future is to be the website for sustainable eco products. And that's across the top $12 billion categories within Australia. So my tip of the spear right now is skincare, but eventually I want to expand into that and have the trust and the confidence of the people who use the site, because they know that those things have actually been verified and confirmed. They've tried the products, they've enjoyed the products, they do find that they work, and it becomes their one-stop eco shop. That's my big vision. Now, my ask for people to help me get there would be, first and foremost, go to osgreenoasis.com.au. Check it out. Tell me what you think. I genuinely am interested, especially if you're interested in sustainable products. And tell me if I'm missing your favorite natural skincare brand or your product. So I'd love to hear from you. The second is connect with me. Follow on Osgreen Oasis on Instagram and Facebook. And lastly, please share your recommendations on blogs and or influencers that are the real deal on natural skincare, sustainable living, and or sustainability, or even life hacks. I'd love to hear it. And that includes you, Usman, because you know everyone and you're at the tip of every trend. So those are my asks. Am I missing something that I should have asked for?
I think those are really fantastic. And for anyone who's listening and watching, I can highly vouch for the amazing work that Shelby is doing. So definitely go buy the product from Osgreen Oasis, follow them, get in early, because I can guarantee you in the next sort of 10, 15, 20 years, you will see this name everywhere. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the amazing work you're doing, and keep going. It's so important, not just for you, but for the planet. So we're really grateful for that. Yeah, thank you once again. Thanks, Shelby.
And thanks so much for the opportunity, Usman. It is always a pleasure to connect and speak with you in any
Thank you.
context.
Thank you.